they asked, does anyone know how to cook? And that raises his hand. So I'm a cook. I'm a birriero, which is the dish that is made, and I tell people it's made to feed kings and queens.
We have a really special treat today. We're talking with Raul Luis from the Birria. It's a restaurant here in Eastern LA. We're going to talk about family. We're going to talk about flavor. Raul Luis, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me here. I'm very, very honored to be here speaking to you.
Now, your father was an amazing person. I'm gonna rewind a little bit, and you're gonna tell me where my dates are right or wrong. Maybe the early 1960s, back in Mexico. He's working in a mercado. He has a tiny little, what, 5-chair restaurant in the mercado.
Right,
So he goes from that to immigrating to your house. I'm gonna house restaurant, if you will. Is that the right word?
right, right.
Tell me a little bit about your dad and what you think inspired him to take this huge life journey and what that taught you.
I look back and I say, how do the immigrants do this? How do they leave their country and leave everything behind? So that he had a small spot, maybe five people to sit there. He would sell on the weekends. Business wasn't that brisk. They were opening up a new let's call it a shopping center, but it's a market. So, but they had required a down payment to get that spot to secure the spot. So he had to come to the U.S. so he could save some money up. So he came during the Bracero program. When he came during the Bracero program, they're getting these people and they're vetting them and they're putting them in different groups. Uh, they asked, does anyone know how to cook? And that raises his hand. So I'm a cook. I'm a birriero. And remember, men in the whole during that time frame, it wasn't acceptable to be a cook unless you were a taquero or a birriero. Those are the only male role or acceptable, I guess, jobs you can have as a cook. Otherwise, the women did all the cooking. So he came over. They asked him if he knew how to cook. He says, I know how to cook. So he began cooking birria for the farm workers. And when he was there, he was limited because now he was out of his comfort zone. He was no longer in Mexico. He didn't have access to all the spices that he used back home. So he had to adjust them. And one of the main things, if you guys get to watch on Birria World or the Chronicles as they're doing the preparation of the different birrias, when they're cooking it, before they put the red adobe sauce, it's white. So all the farm workers they ate it up, but the people who were in charge, the managers, they wouldn't eat it because it wasn't easy on the eyes. People eat with their eyes. So a chef came over, said, you know what are you doing? I'm doing this. He goes, why don't you add the red before? So our process changed. We marinate it before we cook it. And then the second one is there wasn't all the spices we needed. So the chef that was there helped them uh, get new spices or tweak the recipe a bit. And that's what that happened. When he came over, I guess he, like anybody else, you have that aspirations, and his dream, as many immigrants, is they come to the U.S., make some money, go back. He never went back. Once you plant roots, then it's hard to go back to your country of origin. So I think that's what happened with him.
We are here talking with Raul Luis, Birria in East LA. It's so evident that you're a man with cultural value. You have a deep family history, you have a cultural history. Obviously, food is part of that history. Can you talk a little bit about the cultural value and the meaning behind birria and why it's important to you?
It's really important because it's a dish. I tell people, and when I tell them, they kind of get what oh, you get all worked up about it. Why do you? And I can go on for hours talking about it. So I would let me take a little backdrop. We had a third party came and did a story on the origins of video into LA and possibly the US. And in the process of talking, they took this documentary, so to speak, and presented it in front of a classroom of kids. And they did like a pre-screening. The kids were talking. One of the kids came back and says, "Oh, you guys were the gatekeepers." I said, "Gatekeepers? What do you mean the gatekeepers?" I sat down for a while and my head started exploding. I'm thinking, why did he say that? Well, now I get what he was trying to tell us was that we were the gatekeepers of a certain skill set, which is birria, which is the dish that is made, and I tell people it's made to feed kings and queens, right? And they say, well, how do you do that? Well, because if in our region, central Mexico, the birria is eaten fed. Most of the population in Mexico, I'm sorry, is about 85-90% Catholic. So one of the first steps is when the child is born, they take him to the church, and that's where he becomes a king. They baptize him. They have a festivity. There's a party going on, and then the second phase is uh, they feed the quinceañeras. That's a rite of passage where you go from a childhood to adulthood for the girls. So now you feed the princesses the birria. The next step is when the lady gets married, she's the queen. She gets married. So the common denominator in all three of those things traditionally was birria. That's the only thing that was common. That was a trigger that helped people look back to those special occasions. So when people eat the birria and they wow, they go back to that once in a lifetime event. That's what it means. So people like it's a trigger. It's a time traveling for them. I don't know if that's being used out now, time traveling and remote view and all that stuff. So people can go back and those trigger those special memories. And it's also the memories. Fast forward that into when we came into LA, the parents will bring their kids. And there's kids that because of the document just came, I used to come here 20 years ago. I haven't been here. My dad used to bring when I was a kid. I said, well, see, that's all that those are the special memories. And they talk. I was talking to a gentleman there in his late 30s, and he was telling me that he can remember that his father would go into the restaurant and they would stay there talking for hours, and all they were talking about was the past, and that kind of helped him because he heard stories that he had never. How he met his, the father met a mom, with their cousins, their uncles, lost relatives. So that's what it does. It brings the family together, and they just remember about those simple times, fun times. People were laughing and dancing, and they forget about all the worries that life has to bring now. So I think that's one of the main points there.
I love your passion. I love how you explain things. Here we are. We're talking with Raul Luis. Birria is a restaurant in East LA. As we're wrapping up, tell us all the ways that our audience can find you and learn more about you. Tell us your website, your social media, the restaurant itself, anything you want to share.
So they did a documentary. It's Mexi Papa. It's called The Chronicles of Birria. That's on YouTube. You can find me if you want to get. That's just the basic history of how birria got to LA and possibly the US. That goes over the story of myself and another birria who we both held the torch during those times when it wasn't so acceptable in other ethnic groups or generations. If you want more detailed information about the specifics, how certain cooking processes, how it's served, then you can go to Birria World on YouTube. And there it goes. We do a birria tour. We go to different restaurants. We showcase how they cook it, what the different varieties of birria and why it tastes different, how it's served different in certain regions. And then on Instagram, you can go to Birria Chalil, Texas. That's for my Texas. And then there's Birria Chalil for the LA store on Instagram. Then on Facebook, it's Birria Chalil.